Greetings, everyone. This is Ehav Ever from the Chronicles of Ehav Ever, and today's video is going to be about debunking missionary claims about Jewish exegesis in the New Testament. Now, I can pretty much answer this particular question in one statement, I would say. If someone were to ask me, is it true that in the New Testament there's all kinds of Jewish exegesis that's found in it? Whether it be pardes, would it be pesher, or would it be all these different things that Jews use to analyze text, or rabbis have used, or leaders of Jewish communities have used for thousands of years to analyze text. Is this found in the New Testament? And I would have to unequivocally say, no way. Okay, bye, everybody. Have a good day. No, it'd be nice if I could have just ended that way. But there's a couple of things that need to be brought to light here. And I've covered this in some areas of different videos against missionaries or debunking missionaries. So I'll get into a little detail about it, but it won't be for too long because there's no need to rehash everything all over again. Essentially, when you talk about the authors, of the New Testament, especially when you talk about them in terms of being Jewish, the thing that has to be understood here is that whenever you get into this discussion, it ends up being a very strict dead end, literally and figuratively and historically. Now, I've covered this in other videos, and the reasons are very simple. When you deal with something that is a very straightforward thing historically, for example, one of the ways that you can verify various elements of history is if you have people who currently, in the current present time, descend from the people who were involved in the historical thing that you're looking at or the historical acts that you're looking at. Meaning that if you look at someone today and say, I want to understand the Navajo Nation, their history, their culture, and you look and find people who descend directly from the Navajo that you're researching, there's things that you can go. Now, it doesn't mean you accept everything that they say modernly about their ancestors. It just simply means that you have a starting point in which to go. But what happens if you look into a group of people who no longer exist? Their children, descendants didn't continue into the present era. You try to understand what exactly do these writings that were left behind mean. At a certain point, you hit a dead end because no one's there to explain to you exactly what this means that are directly from those people. And sometimes what does happen is that you have people who step up and stand in and say, hey, I know what they knew better than they did and better than anyone in their time frame did. And you ask, okay, well, what's your connection to these people? And someone may say, well, I have none. So that becomes a big problem when you look at historical issues, especially when you're trying to understand historical writings and what someone meant by their writing. Now, when it comes to this whole issue of the New Testament, whether it comes to Yeshu, his students, his, like disciples, whatever you want to call them, you basically look at this issue of you have supposedly the story that, that's perpetuated by Christianity in the New Testament that he had 12 disciples. But then the first thing as a Jew, looking at this, what I would have to say is, okay, well, wait a minute. Who are you? Who are you guys? There's 12 of you guys. Who exactly are you? Okay, I got a bunch of names here, but that doesn't tell me anything about your character. I mean, what families do you come from? What's your father's name? What's your grandfather's name? What tribe are you from? What Torah did you learn as a kid? Did you learn any? And that's true of, not only like Yeshua himself, in terms of the writings of the New Testament, but also his like students. And again, the way to understand this from a Torah Moshe Jewish perspective is that first and foremost, we don't accept the reality of the New Testament Jesus. We know that there was an individual who inspired the stories in the New Testament, but we don't, for example, we the way that most people would say it is that there was a historical figure who inspired these stories, but because of the fact that, he disappeared, and his students disappeared off the historical map 2 generations after they started, essentially it leaves a lot of holes in the story and it leaves a lot of questions. For example, where are your writings? For example, the New Testament contains, like 4 Gospels, but there were 12 disciples of his. What happened to the rest of those guys? Why didn't they write something down? And why do these supposed Gospels contradict each other? And you have one guy named Luke, supposedly, who wasn't even a part of the 12, who writes something over people who supposedly were a part of the 12, which, makes it really strange. The next question you could say is, okay, where are your children? Meaning that, okay, some of you guys are claimed in the New Testament to have families. Well, what happened to Peter's children, for example? It's mentioned they had a family. What happened to his grandchildren? Why are there no Jews today who descend directly from any of the 12 disciples, 12 students that, Yeshu had? Why is that? I mean, if they were like doing gangbusters, if they meaning that if they were on top of the pile, on top of the intellectual know when it comes to Torah, why weren't they the first ones to be able to maintain a community that lasted until the modern era? You should have all kind of Jews right now who can claim to be descendants of all of these guys because of the fact that they were following the truth so hard and so steady that their children should have lasted. But there seems to be this point where it's like a favorite idea within certain elements of Christianity to say that they were all martyred off. Every single one of them got martyred, as if that's something to be proud about. Now in history, for example, there are Jews who were martyred, especially during the Roman occupation. A lot of Jews who were martyred, but we're not proud of the fact that they were martyred, and it isn't like some celebration that they were martyred. I mean, we usually, have sad days the fact that they were martyred, but the thing is, there's a lot of Jews standing today who are descendants of the survivors of those the Roman occupation and the Roman persecution, as well as some of the Jews who were killed during that time. Their children were able to continue and exist to the modern era. When it comes to this whole thing of the disciples of Yeshu, that didn't happen, which goes to my next point. The New Testament is written in Greek. Now there's all kind of modern claims of there being some Hebrew, version of Matthew or this or that. But if you ask someone, okay, well, show me a version from that time, doesn't exist. If you ask, okay, well, show me a copy of that version from that time that exists today, doesn't exist. So then that begs the question. You have a Greek text, Greek being a foreign language to Jews, meaning that it has concepts and ideas around it that are foreign. Further to the point that Jewish exegesis revolves around the Hebrew language, the letters of the Hebrew language, the language itself, and statements of the Hebrew language. All of a sudden, you introduce this foreign language and say there's exegesis that is Jewish in it. The reality is no, there's not at all. This is one of the reasons that you don't find Jewish communities modernly using these languages as a form of exegesis. The only language that has any acceptable value as a translation of an ancient value, for example, that has some level of, you could say, halakhic authority to some degree, would be the Aramaic translation and only of the Torah. That's the one that has like halakhic value to it. The next one down would be, for example, the certain Arabic translations, but mainly the one that was done by Rav Saad Gaon, which was quite a bit of time ago. Now in terms of the Greek language, you don't have that form or ability to have a Jewish exegesis using the Greek language, which is really strange. That again, if you had these people who supposedly were learning from Yeshua as the New Testament claims him to be, which historically, of course, we know is nonsense, but if they were claiming him to be the way that they claim he was to be, he should have been able to teach his students Hebrew fluently, correctly, within a short period of time, and then they should have been the ones going out there writing all this stuff or teaching people in Hebrew. But all of a sudden, you have the situation where the New Testament, this critical document for Christians, is authored in a foreign language to Jews. So I would say no, there is no Jewish exegesis in this text. Essentially, any exegesis that someone has tried to claim to be Jewish is something that they've modernly added to it. Meaning that there are people now who consider themselves either Messianic Jews or Hebrew roots people who are trying to find some way to prove out a Jewishness to the New Testament, who have added things to it or interpreted things in certain ways to say, okay, well, this means this now because of the Zohar. This means that because of the Talmud, or this means that because of this Midrash. And if you look at it and say, okay, well, wait a minute, where does the original author tell me that that's how you understand this text? Where do you find the original authors of the New Testament, for example, claiming to use Pesher, or claiming to use, Pardes, claiming to use this Midrashic idea? You don't have any of those guys who survived to explain what their process of writing was, if they even wrote it to begin with, because one of the consensus is that the original disciples of Yeshu, his original students, didn't write the current text of the New Testament. They may have inspired them, they may have written something that predated them, but the ones that are currently in the hands of Christians are not ones that, in a sense, that is even traced back to them directly. And again, you only have 4 gospels that supposedly describe this group of events in history, and you don't have, a situation where they're united in the descriptions of like the history that they're even talking about. So again, you don't have this situation where the original group left behind this exegesis group of tools that is currently used today amongst Christians. What you do have amongst Jews, for example, is you have Jews who descend directly from all the Jews who were doing all the writing that we're talking about from ancient times. And further to that point, the claim of the Jewish community, the ancient Torah Moshe Jewish community, as well as modern communities that are Orthodox or Torah Moshe, the basic claim that we have is that our methods of exegesis, many of them come directly from Moshe Rabbeinu at Har Sinai, or Moses, from that time onward, for example, because you had a continuation of Jews who were teaching Torah in Hebrew, in the language of Hebrew. You had a continuation of Jewish leaders who were teaching Torah in Hebrew. You had a tradition of passing down this information to as many Jews as possible, which is the reason why today, you have Jews who continue to maintain the ability to read and understand and even write in ancient Hebrew. When you look amongst Christians, you don't have Christians who are sitting down writing, in this form of Greek, as for the most part. You may have leaders, but you don't have the average rank and file Christian able to read Greek and it's not something that's taught as a regular thing as a part of a culture. So this is where I would say that no, there's no, again, anyone can invent anything they want, and say, okay, well, this exegesis is what I see out of it. And again, there are even Christians today who've taken this Greek text and translated it into Hebrew and then tried to use that as their way of saying there's an exegesis here. And again, the only way for there to have been an exegesis in the New Testament is for someone to have, one of the writers, to have explained what it was and how it worked. You can't just simply say, well, they were using Jewish exegesis when they weren't even writing in a Jewish language. They were writing in a foreign language, completely foreign language, which a couple of centuries earlier Jews were fighting to get rid of. Meaning that there was a certain point where the Hashmonaim were leading Jewish revolts against Greek culture being put into Jewish, areas in Israel, which included the language too. And this is, again, there's this myth that people have that all of a sudden the Jewish world was using Greek all over the place, when in reality most of the Jewish world was not using Greek. Most, Jews, especially Torah-based Jews, weren't educated in Greek and tried to stay away from it. And at most it'd be like the language of commerce, but not something that someone said, I'm going to write down this exegesis in Greek. I'm going to take my Torah and translate it into Greek. No, it was the Hebrew language. So in conclusion, no, you can't really pull out the New Testament and pull out this text that was originally written in Greek and say that there's some Jewish exegesis there. You can invent something if you want to, but you can't claim it's historical or accurate. Take care. This is a Havefer, and bye.